Okay, so welcome to the third and final session of this important conference on underground sociabilities. My name is Ricky Burdett. I'm a professor of urban studies here at the London School of Economics, and together with a number of colleagues such as Gareth Jones and Sandra, I'm one of many of the interdisciplinary people interested in the changes happening in cities, both on the surface and under the surface. So I'm very interested in the language used in this conference. I happen to be an architect and a planner, and therefore I'm come at this issue of the changes in cities not just from the point of view of social, economic and cultural change that we've heard so much about, but also from the point of view of spatial change, which was referred to in some of the presentations before. I think social and spatial change in a city like Rio are very, very closely connected. And also I was involved in the last 4 or 5 years in the Olympics here in London and saw the important changes that are possible over time, but with very sustained investment and very strong political vision, which of course is the big question mark in Rio over the next years, as was talked about before. My role is to just chair this discussion, to introduce the three speakers and do the very simple thing I see here, which is to keep Brazilians on time. That's not a problem. So that's going to be fine. But I want to remind you that even though my name seems very Anglo-Saxon and I may look English, I'm actually Italian. So state attenti. Non si può parlare più di 15 minuti. Ci sarà una violenza latina, assolutamente. Non c'è sangue inglese. So, on that basis, I will go back and wear my English hat. We're going to slightly change the order of presentations, but in talking about the notions of effectively the roots of underground sociabilities, we have three, I think, extremely interesting speakers who are going to look at this issue or these issues from different perspectives in terms of their own positions. Effectively from the position of government, which we will have Rogerio join us in a few moments. From the position, I think, very interesting for us at the London School of Economics, of an academic but also very engaged in community action in the case of Jailson. But we're going to actually start with Luis Erlanger, who is, in fact, could say represents community, but a very engaged community which comes from business, which has been for years committed, I think, to action in the very difficult parts of the cities. He graduated from the School of Communication at the Federal University of Rio. He's now the Director of Global Communications Network, one of the major sort of corporates, of course, in Brazil. And he's been a long-standing partner of many of the, in fact, initiatives that you've heard talked about today, including Afro Reggae, Kufa, and of course UNESCO and its various initiatives. So I think, Luis, it will be very interesting to hear your perspective on this. You have 15 minutes from now. No, you don't. Wait, you don't. We have to see a film. I forgot. We have a film first. My fault. So you have 14 minutes.
A gente passou a utilizar essas pontes que foram construídas para construir novas parcerias, né?
Em que a gente continue incentivando essas vias de mão dupla.
Acho que a gente precisa da mistura, mas ao mesmo tempo essa liga não pode virar uma massa corrida.
Okay, thank you very much for that clip, which reminds us the context within which these next three presentations are happening. So, having introduced Luis, could you now give us your 15 minutes of thoughts, connecting also the previous presentations to this panel. Thank you.
Good evening. First of all, I would like to thank you for the invitation to talk a bit about our work, and most of all, yes. Again? Good evening. Time now. First of all, I would like to thank you for the invitation to talk a bit about our work, but most of all, to allow me to talk in Portuguese. Eu não gosto de fazer apresentações nem de falar, não tenho nem coordenação.
Make presentations in English, and I can't use the computer and speak at the same time. But as we said before, this is a right of defense rather than a conference. I did not come here to speak about global and how nice it is and how we should open for the third sector or for the people who are deprived or favela community. A great part of the Brazilian population needs social inclusion. So we need to stress, for those who do not know Rio, that the wealthy population in Rio is very near to a stray bullet as well. You come from Cidade de Deus, where I live, in 15 minutes. When you say a divided city, it's not a geographic feature, but it is a social feature. I took the plane on Wednesday, arrived on Thursday. I'm speaking today, and tomorrow I'm going back. But it would be worthwhile just to hear Feijão say that he's a friend of my daughter. And I don't say this in terms of executive of the most important network in Brazil, but I speak about this in terms of a citizen. I have 6 children. They learned that it's important that people like Feijão are equal. I'm not going. The role that TV Globo does, it has 70% of shares. So 7 of every television. There are other networks in Brazil, so it's a democratic choice. We have a program that is favored by the population, but in average. So the role that we have is to recognize that the system is important. And Souza already quoted that the first time he came into my room, and he said, he talks with a finger in my face. He seems angry, but he's not angry. He was very annoyed with the report from Globo that presented a project of CUFA like if it were, it must be my 6 children. Sorry. As if we are presenting CUFA as an auxiliary arm of drug trafficking, and entities like CUFA and Afroeg before were badly understood by the middle class, so they thought that everybody was linked to drug dealing. I'm not very good in conference. I don't even know how to switch off the telephone. So we have things linked to this group and gave a certain respect. So it's our way of acting, and there's some work, some programs that are in important that are showed at the most important moments in the Brazilian TV.
Fiquei 32 anos no crime, fiquei 11 anos preso. Quando eu vi a minha filha entrando para me fazer a visita naquele dia de Natal, e falou que eu poderia dar um presente para ela. Que no outro ano eu não estivesse mais naquele lugar. Hoje, eu, Norton Guimarães, coordeno esse projeto de empregabilidade pelo Afroreg.
Empregabilidade, o projeto de emprego para ex-detentos que já deu uma segunda chance a centenas de pessoas. Quem acreditou não se arrependeu.
O resto da minha vida eu vou continuar a dar esse presente para minha filha.
Foram quase 30 anos entre crimes e prisões. Acordar cedo e ir para o trabalho é novidade na vida de Norton, ex-assaltante de bancos. Começou a disputa. 10 finalistas entre 2.500 inscritos. Estilos variados: soul, blues, pop, rap, samba, forró. Subiram ao palco talentos revelados em várias comunidades do Rio.
O grupo de 60 alunos de escolas públicas foi escolhido para ver Rio antes da estreia mundial. Recepcionadas pela Arara Azul, personagem do filme, as crianças gostaram do tratamento VIP.
É bom demais. Estou com uma expectativa muito grande.
O conjunto do Alemão ganhou em dezembro do ano passado o primeiro cinema com projetor 3D numa favela brasileira.
O projeto Conexões Urbanas, uma parceria da Globo Rio com o Afro-Reggae, artistas vão cantar, mas também conscientizar os moradores sobre a dengue. A entrada é de graça. As crianças já começaram a ensaiar a coreografia.
Um pente ao pente ao pente ao pente, pra matar a dengue. Um pente ao pente ao pente ao pente.
Taça das Favelas, um gol para a vida toda. Se você tem entre 15 e 17 anos, faça sua inscrição na Associação de Moradores da sua comunidade. Participe! Conheça as favelas classificadas para grande disputa. Realização CUFA.
Rocinho e Jacarezinho decidiram o título entre os homens.
Os primeiros colocados da prova completaram o percurso em 17 minutos, mas a maioria demorou bem mais do que isso. Nada que atrapalhasse a sensação de ultrapassar os limites.
Sábado é dia de curtir as emoções do basquete de rua. Não perca a grande final, dia 25 de setembro. Libra 2010. Realização CUFA.
Basquete de rua.
O basquete de rua vem dos americanos e as regras também. Na cadência do hip hop, as tribos que circulam na periferia da quadra dançam o mesmo ritmo.
Uma invasão de arte e alegria. Hoje, o principal acesso à favela da Grota, no conjunto do Alemão, foi ocupado pelo grupo Afrolata.
Estamos aqui em São Paulo para a realização da última etapa regional do Top CUFA Brasil 2012. Uma iniciativa da Central Única das Favelas para valorizar a diversidade feminina, combatendo todas as formas de preconceito.
Jovem, preto, novo, pequeno, Falcão fica na laje de plantão no sereno. Drogas, armas, sem futuro, moleque cheio de ódio, invisível no escuro puro.
Eu queria ter um amor de uma mãe, de uma tia, que eu nunca tive. Um amor de uma família pra me dar, se eu precisasse ir pra conversar. Ela tava lá, pronto, porra, vem conversar comigo, pá, eu vou lá conversar. Não, eu nunca tive, se eu tivesse uma família pra conversar, eu não estaria nessa vida, não.
Esse último programa Falcão.
This last program, Falcão, as Souza had commented upon it, it was shown in the most important time of the Brazilian TV. If you could buy it, it would 1 minute cost 300,000 reais. This created a commotion in the country because in Fantástico, a program where the family watches to be entertained, well, my colleagues of Globo said, well, how good that Globo showed another reality. And I said, no, this is the reality. We have a program called Central da Periferia, And the idea is to show that, the elite in Rio is a great periphery, and there's a proximity. And what happens in this process? The model is this. People come to speak to us about projects. And we also always have an advertising showing what has happened. And there's a journalistic coverage. And there's a very important role in terms of self-esteem. A person sees itself on TV with very known celebrities. And this facilitates the proximity of the finance of certain businesses, because they realize that not people are not just criminals. So why do we do this? As I said to people that I was going to make a speech at LSE, they said they should have things. I quoted Ortega because he says, "My environment is part of my identity," and I thought that this quotation was very important. Globo is not an island. It lives in Brazil with a population that has 40% of illiterate people. For the business of Globo, it's important that the population is educated, has social inclusion, that it's in the employment market, and not being only nice, and then think, well, we have to help those who are poor. It's an important project that is in the interest of the Globo TV. There are other important questions, which is a question of protagonism. To have an idea of Falcão, which dealt with the story of many children who were killed by the involvement with trafficking. The video was captured, edited by Kufa, and this is out of the normal. So he gave the film, and we had no interference, and this is very important, as it was said before. They don't need intermediaries. They are the protagonists of their own speech. We believe that what they're doing is what transforms the reality of the favelas. And it's very important for us that when we speak about social identity, cultural and social identity as capacity, the culture of global TV is very important. We export our programs to 150 countries, so it's important because in Brazil we consume Brazilian music, Brazilian theater, and Globo is an example of creative economy because one of the way of developing is our capacity of creating culture from the very sophisticated one like bossa nova and music, for instance, but it's very rich in terms of culture. So the protagonists have to be sustainable within their art. And we have also this, when we try to stop protection to intellectual property, it seems that we are reaching the powerful, but as a matter of fact, you hit the cultural producer. Well, this was to give you an idea of our work and the communication media. We are private. We exist to earn money. What we have is everything that we have is registered in terms of public concession. But to be a public concession, we do not have to assume this role. 6 years ago, we had a consultation with Spectrum, a company that worked in England, to study the renewal of BBC concession. BBC was ending their concession, and the UK citizens have to pay for the BBC. BBC hired Spectrum to create a benchmark on what it has, what she calls the public value of TV, because BBC is seen as a public value. But Globo is a private company. but we have a public value by option of the shareholders. Within the law, we did not have to have this other additional role, but it's important for the business in the long run. We have many partnerships, as you can see. Let's see the other video. I can distribute this later. Journalism, publicity, we have social projects, and for instance, the Taça da Favela, we worked with them, and we opened the artistic programs. So when Celso spoke about being in the Caldeirão, and the topic Kufa is within entertainment, and sometimes we put programs with responsible themes. So there's a commercial merchandising with soap operas, for instance, but we have a social one as well. So when the people say, oh, there'll be the Taça da Favela, this is all studied and implemented to disseminate the theme in our network. Now I'm going to show you a video. And it's the video I'm going to show to end my speech. It's only 1 minute. These are programs who are dealing with, well, this is a new soap opera from Globo, and there's another one called Suburb.
É claro que tem um lado glamouroso, mas a gente não deixa de tratar das mazelas que essas comunidades enfrentam. Longo caminho pela frente, mas a gente está trilhando. Obrigado.
Luis, you know perfectly well that we could have watched another 1 hour of this extraordinary film work. Can I ask you 2 or 3 very simple questions? I think this is an extremely interesting initiative in terms of identity and using television as the most public of media to bring people from the favelas onto the screen. 1 or 2 just very simple questions. How many people in the favelas have televisions?
Todos.
Everybody.
Nós temos, em média, 70% de share em qualquer
70% of a share in every class, class A, B, C. It's a great vehicle. TV in Brazil has more penetration than radio. It's the second most bought gadget. Brazilians sees 5 hours of TV per day.
So that's a very interesting point. That in the favelas, this is not an exclusive market. This is for everybody who's watching this. What time of day are these programs shown?
Para eu ter 70% de audiência,
To have 70% of audience, I have to be seen by all classes, all ages, all publics. We do not want to be segmented. So all the programs which I watch, they are prime time. In the morning, there are 100 million TVs. You're not on all the time. But it's unfortunate that they are not on every single minute of the day. But 10-15% is on in the morning, and at prime time, it's 70%. We're on DVDs, on cable TV, but the suburbia, for instance, anything at that time is the following day is the talk of the town. Everybody will be speaking about it.
And last question, since this is such an incredibly sophisticated and intelligent idea, are your competitors doing the same thing? Are other television companies doing the same thing?
mês depois eles tentam fazer
A month later, they try to do the same. No, seriously, without being arrogant, our merit is that we deal with this theme with a quality of standard of global, and it's better than any soap opera. So we're using the best resources. It's not just a little poor program just because we are dealing with poor people. So when we deal with this universe, we use the shirt of the community. And there's a man called Joãozinho 30 who used to say the following: who likes poverty is the rich. Poor people like luxurious things. So no, it's different. Who likes poverty are the intellectuals. So I just said that they're rich, but it's really meaning intellectuals.
Let's move now to a slightly different scale of, in a way, visioning the possibility of community action, not through the medium of media, effectively, but through the medium of governance. And we have Rogerio Sottili. Rogerio, if you want to, are you speaking from here or will you stand over there? Yeah. Rogerio is the Vice Minister of the General Secretariat of the Presidency of the Republic of Brazil. Therefore, he is in a very important position because it's within the central mechanism of the federal state of Brazil that he and his colleagues occupy a very important space. And that is a space that effectively works very much around the President's office about these key themes of social inclusion, youth, and social participation. And it's fascinating, I think, to hear from you how the central government, not local community, how the central government actually envisage policies which affect people at very, very different levels. So, Rogerio, welcome, and we look forward to hearing your words. Thank you.
Thank you. Bom, em primeiro lugar, eu quero.
I would like to say that I prepared my speech because I would worry about the British time. So I would start by saying good afternoon to everyone, and it's with a great pleasure to participate of the opening of this international seminar, which discusses this research so important. I would like to thank the invitation of UNESCO And to share this moment with you, I'd like to congratulate Sandra, the researcher, for this very beautiful research, a partnership with LSE and Afroreg and CUFA. The presentation of UNESCO in Brazil. I like also to greet my colleagues at the table, Luis Erlanger, Jailson Souza, our coordinator, Ricky. Apart from the importance, academic importance, this work brings excellent contributions to analyze the role of the state and the civil society organizations in the implementation of public policies, which will contribute to the overcoming of the context of social exclusion and marginalization. As Secretary Executive of the portfolio responsible for the promotion of social participation and youth policies, I can state that the
underground sociabilities is already proving to be very valuable for the public policies of the government. And the diagnostic that's been presented shows that we're on the right path. We just need to perfect the performance of the state, and we can do this if we strengthen the partnership with the organizations of civil society in the quest for solutions to meet the challenges of the social challenges in Brazil. As you, ladies and gentlemen, know, in the last decade, Brazil went through an intense process of economic and social development. Social programs and the transfer of income by means of the Bolsa Familia, which is a family bursary. This has become an international benchmark, and it has reached 40 million people, taking them out of poverty and contributed to the reduction of the inequalities, social inequalities in our society. According to the commitment of our President Dilma, we're going to continue until we overcome poverty in Brazil. In addition to the social and economic improvements, Brazil advanced very much in the consolidation of democracy, strengthening its institutions and its social representation, and increasing public spaces and channels for social participation. With this, civil society could influence the processes for formulation, the implementation and monitoring of public policies. Just to illustrate, of the traditional channels in social participation, at present we have 36 legal councils and commissions at a national level from the government, the federal government, that has the participation of social and civil society for defining the courses for public policies. And in addition to this, since 2003, more than 80 conferences were held nationally on public policies with the involvement of more than 10 million people. And in addition to other mechanisms, we also have other initiatives, and all of these advancements need to be reflected in the lives of people. And in the history of people, we don't see the statistics. In the micro context, in the communities of the society, we can see these. The underground sociabilities shows the reality of life. The life and the struggle of young people show the construction of their courses and the courses in rising above the problems. Their trajectories shows that they've resisted the situations that they have faced, such as poverty, violence, the absence of the state, social discrimination and racial discrimination. People who found innovating situations or initiatives in civil society, they have benefited from the psychosocial scaffolding for the transforming of their social trajectories. NGOs, Brazilian NGOs, Afro-Hega and Kufa have developed, and their work is recognized. It is fantastic, the methodology used to strengthen the protagonism of youth people in community development and in valuing local cultural activities, to overcome stereotypes and to build up bridges by means of mediations to connect the favela to the rest of the world. It is evident that the importance of action of the organization of civil society and the elaboration of policies is important for its success. The social participation is, above all, an essential instrument for deepening democracy in our countries. It creates the conditions so that the social movements and the universities and the setup of organized civil society, together with its vast accumulated experience, can contribute to all aspects of the political process, construction process. This process and the mutual agreement and the responsibilities that are shared makes it possible for there to be better cohesion and coherency, and therefore with greater effectiveness. The challenge that is placed on the state in these cases that have been shown in the research is that of disseminating the technologies, the social technologies that have been developed by society for its transformation. Without any doubt, we have advanced a lot, and the UPPs in Rio are an example of what is possible, as mentioned by Roberto. It shows that it is possible to change the role of the state. The passive history of inequalities in Brazil is enormous, and there is a great need for us to move faster. How can we multiply these initiatives in the various communities in the Brazilian cities and in the world? My experience as a politician in social movement and more recently in the government allow me to say that to come out of this crisis, it is important that we should have as a basis a dialogue. There is no efficacy in public policies and social development without social participation, which guarantee the identity with the community and the valuing of knowledge, local knowledge, social initiatives, solidarity, hope, and active involvement of everyone. And secondly, we also need to multiply the points of contact with the asphalt community. We need to facilitate the contact of the state with those separated areas. We need to transform the relationship of the police with the population, and to rise above stigma. And we need to guarantee the rights of young people, and to alert them to their rights and empower them, and also to strengthen the community itself. We know that over the last decade, Brazil advanced a lot in social policies, but our youth still need support so as to have their inclusion guaranteed in society. This difficulty, which is more pronounced when we look at the black young people, and the long period of difficulties are almost slave-like. And we've been combating this in the construction of our democracy. And so we have to create and multiply institutions that act as social scaffolding. And in this, we need to expand and increase the initiatives of the communities together with entities that dialogue with the community and with young folks. The state needs to support the initiatives that exist and to work for the multiplication of social technologies that are working. In this regard, I would like to share with you some of the initiatives of the federal government to face these issues. We have regarded as a priority the construction of the Youth Life, a plan for prevention of violence against young blacks. Today, tragically, almost 25,000 young people died every year because of homicides in peripheral areas around central urban cities of Brazil. Because of this, this plan is intended to reduce the vulnerability of young people to situations of physical violence and symbolic violence. These actions are aimed at the creating of opportunities for inclusion and autonomy. It aims at creating spaces for activities and also to concentrate in areas where there's a high incidence of homicide. In addition to improving the participation of the state by means of facing up to institutional racism and creating of awareness among public agencies. The actions are principally to guarantee the rights of young people to education, to quality of life, to work, decent work, to culture, to mobility, and to social participation, mainly to life. As part of this plan, we're starting a program which we called Estações Juventude, Young People Stations. Whether it operates as a psychosocial scaffold or as professionals, with professionals who work and help young people in building up alternatives for their trajectories. So the role of the federal government is to join forces with this initiative to strengthen and to see the young people as someone who has rights. This research has taught us very much. It strengthens the idea that we need change. And this change, in order to be sustainable, could only occur if we count on the social support of all of the communities involved. And with this, we have proposals that are more adequate, that are more connected with the local reality, and with a contracted relationship. The intervention of organizations such as KUFA and Afro-HEG that count on the interventions and help of the state are necessary. It has made it possible for us to control the involvement of police and also for the development of a culture of peace and a culture of human rights. And this situation produced new forms of acting on the part of the state and the realignment of values that makes it possible to establish a new understanding of the state with regards to the community and among the community with regards to the state. Health, we therefore salute these entities and UNESCO. The energy and the willingness that we feel today needs to continue. It is fundamental that this network that's been created by the Academy and assisted by the UN and civil society organizations and national agencies be mobilized to promote human rights. And this is the means for creating the basis for an ongoing process of interchange, of partnership and transformation. And only by this means we can to build up a society that is fairer. We understand that this situation is still very difficult in my country, but the initiatives that have been highlighted by the research shows that the interventions by civil society are essentials if there is going to be hope and a future. And this is not very little. They teach us to dream. Thank you very much.
Rogerio, thank you very much and for showing us why your government is so efficient. It makes important statements, it has high ambitions, and it delivers on time. In fact, you have 30 seconds left, which is really incredibly impressive. I would like to ask, can you hear the translation? Yeah. I would just like to ask you one or two things while we think through the importance of what you have said. First of all, you acknowledge that research itself from an academic, and in this case international academic project, in a way validates some of the work that you are already doing at a political level. And it also, in many ways, gives you a stimulus to do more. One of the things that I think it would be interesting to share with what is always at the LSE a very international audience is to explain how does a very centralized part of the government that you belong to, the federal government, how do you actually trickle down these initiatives in situations where you also have very strong state organizations, the state of São Paulo, the state, and city, metropolitan organizations? How do you actually take these ideas and make them work in, let's call it, political territories which are not, technically speaking, your own? Do you understand? Is the question clear? Thank you.
Obrigado. Thank you for the question. It helps me to clarify the attributions of the federal government. First, the federal government has concern, and it works within the federal intervention, but it has as basic premise the federative pact, meaning the relation with the states and with the municipalities. Who ends up producing policies are the states and municipalities. And for us, the federal government is important, this partnership and articulation. It's important to understand, in the case of my ministry, the ministry in which I work, the attribution of the General Secretary of the President of the Republic establishes a relationship with movements of the civil society, with NGOs, and NGOs act in territories. So we have, it's very important for us to recognize the organizations of civil society and social movements as strategic partners. As I said in my speech, it's important that civil society is seen as a tool, a complementary organization to public policies. They're fundamental. And from the point of view of public management, if we do not see it that way, it will be less efficient, because it's a community that knows its reality, that has its experience to indicate the pathways to follow to build public policies. What Kufu and Afro-Regi showed us is that if we do not have the participation of civil society, we will not have efficiency in our policies. The UPPs, when they started to be implemented in Rio, they were criticized by their work and the relationship with the community and with these entities of social organizations made that the state and police could improve their intervention. So it's important to open for dialogue and for intervention with civil society.
Yeah, no, that's very clear. But give me, you took the two examples, if I understood, I didn't get the full names, but one is the prevention of violence and the other one is young people stations, I think were the two initiatives that you described. Just to give us very concrete sense of what does your department do? Does it provide money to create young people stations in 10 cities around the city? How does it work? How do you actually have an impact on the ground?
Perfeito.
Well, the General Secretary coordinates an articulation of 13 ministries of the federal government around this program that I called Juventude Viva, Live Youth. And we identified in research the indicators that show that the violence in the country is declining very much. But we also saw that the violence against black youth between 15 and 29 years old grew enormously in relation to the decline of violence in general. So the Brazilian government needs to do some intervention of public policies that would not be an intervention only of repression, but an intervention of opportunity policies and prevention policies against violence. So we created policies of 13 ministries: health, women, combat racism, Ministry of Culture, Justice, 13 ministries. And we took these social policies to the areas and to have a link with the states and the municipalities. Actions like more education, which means make the schools open in 2 turns, or leave the schools open in the weekend for educational and sport activities, points of culture for the creation of culture in the community. To the Ministry of Sports, many policies of incentive of sports.
Having schools open for more time. Do you just provide more money from central government for the salaries of teachers and cleaners and security? Do you provide more money? Is that how you make it happen?
Well, for school education, it's a program of the Ministry of Education, which gives the possibility of increasing the number of hours in the school for the population. And you do this with more resources. And of course, this produces not more salaries, but more, of course, hours worked for the professors. It means more contracts and more teachers working in these schools. And one more. And Estação da Juventude Station is a program which is being done by the Brazilian government, which is part of one of the works of Juventude Viva, in the areas where the violence is much more aggressive, where we can offer opportunities, public policies of education, leisure, a center of information to how to get to public policies for the young people. And these youth stations will be fixed, and there'll be some mobile as well for areas of difficult access. We have 132 territories in Brazil where the violence is critical, and we're going to work in these 132 territories, which are part of all the states of the Federation.
Thank you very much, Rogerio. And maybe that provides some sort of link to what Jailson de Souza Silva, maybe you want to go up, is going to talk about, because the mere fact that he's the general coordinator of the Favela Observatory implies both an observation, data collection, both at a quantitative and qualitative level, and one of action. I already mentioned that Jailson in my introduction teaches, is a professor in the Department of Education at the University of the Federal University Fluminense, I hope I have it correct, but is very clearly engaged in some of the communities that he's going to now talk about. So welcome and thank you.
Obrigado, boa tarde a todos e a todas.
Good afternoon to everyone. I have this task to conclude the process of speeches. We have had many speeches today here, and my head, as yours, starts mixing things. So I have two challenges here. First is to try to speak slowly. I usually speak very fast, and I make the interpreters completely crazy. And also to explain a little bit in this framework of so many speeches that go from very optimistic ones and many critical ones, to talk about the moment that we are living in Rio and in Brazil. So this is my challenge. First, to speak about my pleasure to be here, because I'm coming from a civil society organization, and the main protagonists of this meeting are Kokufa and Afro-Hegi. And as was said before, this research fulfills a very important role and recognizes that the very rich process is made by people from the favelas. So Silvia Ramos already raised a number of things of which I would like to talk about. The most important is trying to understand what represents for us in Rio this framework of new characters that come into scene from the 90s. Favela is much more complex, and Brazil is much more complex than you can imagine from here. I am, for instance, a professor of the university, a federal university, a very elitist university. I'm doctor in education sociology of education. I'm always black. I'm a child of immigrants in a very poor area of Rio. I was the first member of my family to go into a university, and I lived many years in the favela. So I'm an intellectual of the favelas. I'm the intellectual of the periphery. And this is already different. We have many different people in favelas. We have people who go into criminality, which are very few. And once I gave an interview to a journalist, and she said, oh, no, but it's an absurd to have the prejudice against favelas. The majority of people in the favela are not criminals, a maximum 30%. And I said to her that in the favela of Maré, we have 150,000 people living there. So we would have in Maré 50,000 people that would be muggers and traffickers. So we would have 500,000 people in Rio that every day would go to work criminals. So this is a progressist journalist. She was from the left. So if it was a conservative person, she would think, as everyone does think, that the majority of people who live in favelas are criminals. In Maré, in this favela where the Observatory of Favelas is, we have 10 times more university students than drug dealers. But the feeling is that the favela is completely taken by poor people. I have horror of this word, deprived, because when you designate a favela by its poverty, by its deprivation, you do not see what Bio said in the video, the potential of the favela, because we have in the favela the expression of where the real inequality. I do not work with the concept of broken city or divided city. It's simply an unequal city. In the favela, we have to go to the beaches, the Ipanema, Maracanã Stadium to watch football. We work in the center of the city. We circulate in the city. So what changes is that we have historically in Brazil a divided state, a state that uses the public money and uses it against on the very, very rich areas of the city. So we have a citadel where people have the entitlement of the security forces, of public services, and leaves 2 million people without access to these fundamental equipments. So it's a state that allows historically that we have criminal groups dominating the territories and regulating social life. And that we respect much more the criminal groups historically than the police itself, because the police today, well, we have proud. You don't understand how proud we are when we hear Roberto Sakis, which is a very correct policeman in Rio. But until the previous government, The police chief was condemned because he was the chief of criminal groups in Rio. The secretary of public security was elected, and he was elected by the militia, which is paramilitary groups. So we had the political structure completely corrupted by the criminal powers. So when we talk about the contradiction of Brazil today, we speak about a country that has become very rich since to the 2000s. We will not have money from London because once Lula said that we are rich, they invest somewhere else. But in terms of human rights, we do not have investments from business or from the state, and we are each time more isolated in terms of how can we guarantee the facing of the most important situations of Brazil. We're talking about, Rogerio talked about racism in Brazil, because 21% the number of whites murdered, but now there was an increase in the percentage of blacks assassinated. So the chance of you being murdered as a black person has increased despite the fact that we're a richer country. We have an executive secretary, which Gilberto and Rogerio. We have a ministry of education, of sports, of tourism. They are not allowed to give. Sorry, but this person is speaking so fast, I can hardly work.
Contrato
Yes, we need him to speak more slowly. We have cases of corruption with a few organizations, ONGs or NGOs, that were organized to take money from the government, to divert Genera from that. And so various ministries can't form partnerships with civil society. We have universities in Brazil. Many professors in universities, instead of doing research such as the LSE is doing, regard the NGOs as the fifth column of the capitalism, and these are going through interpretations that we simply have partners in capital. On the other hand, we are seen by the government and many organizations as groups that are committed to the interests of the bandits or human rights. So we have this paradoxical situation. It makes it difficult for us to speak on the edge of the blade and the razor. But certainly what we have here to stress is that thanks to people such as Souza Jr., Afro Heg, Kufa, and others, that we've had the opportunity to create a new ground for the Carioca, the city of the resident of, which is a person who values the difference. So he has an awareness of himself. It's a Carioca that has the ability to have mobility in the society. We've always circulated throughout the city, but now we have mobility. We have economic mobility. There is economic growth, which is reaching the black people, which is this so-called new middle class, are black people such as us who have the means of moving up economically. We also have a cultural mobility, which is we're getting to the university. We have social mobility. More and more we're moving into various areas, and we have new access to new facilities. And we have symbolic mobility. We are feeling more owners of the city because historically people such as us were driven by to have shame of everything because of our color, because studying in a public school, living in a favela, shame because we live in the periphery of Brazil and having illiterate parents. But now we have the pride of reinventing the city, and Souza Jr. and others are doing is simply giving us the possibility to invent another form to live in our city. Thank you very much. Marley is my controller for speed. We do need her to control the speed a little. So our fundamental challenge is we're discussing how to be as a new contemporary. We're not working with a teleological philosophy. We're living the present right now, and this present is to live respecting differences. By means of Kufa and Afro-Hege, they bring an acknowledgement of others. And when we talk about other, we talk about homosexual, we talk about women, we talk about black people and favela dwellers. And it increases, it draws attention to our origin. I know I'm Jailson, Celso, he knows he is Celso. We have a sense of origin, popular origin. We have a pride in this. And we know that we're not only, we're also private citizens. We're also human beings. And because of this, we can share our humanity in a meeting such as this. We are ecological creatures as well. We need to know how to care for this planet, because the new Carioca, this new human being, he's adopting for human dignity. And he is looking for people who want to live in the same way and share the city in the same way. And in this regard, Globo can be, even though it is a business structure which seeks to do business, and the aim is to get profits, it can be a partner because it understands that the better the city, the better it is for their businesses, the better it can sell to its citizens and to consumers. And it's obliged to discuss with the state and to negotiate with the police, because the police is, if police is part of the violence, then it's also part of the solution. So we need a different type of police officers. We need, at the same time, we don't want to be stigmatized. But what is most important in the struggle that is taking place in Rio is the symbolic struggle, because this institutes the reality. And in the last government, not in this current one, they spent 600 million reais to build cultural equipment facilities in the richest part of the city. During this time, in the same period, 10 areas was put out of service because of lack of conditions for use. The UPP is a central policy. The only problem with them is that it got there quite late. It should have been there a long time ago. And the problem for most people in the city is public security is not a right of us. We have to have a sense of it, and we have to have a way of control. We need the favela dwellers think that they have to have control, and the problem is the militias, which are the most dangerous groups, and they're growing in Rio during this process. And so the militias, they are being combated with less fervor and intensity than there were some years ago. So our problem is that at the same time that the favelas are being freed from drug trafficking, territories in the city are being consolidated as territories controlled by the militias. And at the same time, we have a big risk. If the police simply goes into the territory and they don't take integrated measures for development, then these favelas, which are in the richest areas of the city, they will not be simply removed by the state, or even removed by the trade, but they're going to be removed by the market. Because if you go to see Rio, you're going to see what effect the speculation of prices in real estate is the illegality and what's happening in these criminal areas. Something that happens in London, but also happen in Rio. So the displacement of people, the city can only be developed and because of its diversity. So what Celso Jr. and Afro-Hege Kufa has shown is that this theme, this on-the-ground sociability, this is a space that is invisible, is not. We need to be. We are absolutely visible, and we can enter into a pact with the public. Only the state can produce the scale, and so the work for Rogerio and the Secretariat of the Presidency is to approve the landmark regulation that our task is to get public security by means of more investments and the democratization of access to universities. And so organizations such as us are actions that are exemplary. We give an example. We create the methodology, the social technology, but only the democratic state can effectively take care of the interests of the majority of the population. So our fundamental complexity is at the same time that we're advancing the concept of a contemporary and having a state, a democratic state. We have policies that in which 30% of the population don't wish to vote. So we need to avoid machista and replace them with modern situations, modern values. Brazil is a very complex society, and the challenge, as mentioned here by the LSE and research here, is to produce thinking, information, proposals, and try to help the state so that all of us, all of the citizens in the city can be treated with dignity and respect and be treated as human beings, and for us to be able to shine all the more, and that our 50,000 homicides could be reduced, and so we can create a new human being that is even more beautiful. Thank you very much.
That was both a passionate and a very insightful call to arms in many ways from someone who lives the problems that have been discussed, and I appreciate that. Can I just pick up on 2 points before we open up the discussion to others? I think your comment right at the end when you were talking about the role of central government is, I think, exactly one of the levels, perhaps even a meta level of scaffolding, of infrastructure, of support that is very necessary. You seem to be both positive but also encouraging Rogerio and central government to do more. What is the one thing they should be doing more of? Central government, federal government.
Brazil has advanced a lot in terms of economic policies, but now we have limits in other areas. The program that Rogerio mentioned today was created in 2012. The fundamental challenge for the federal government is to integrate these policies so that we can have an action that reach mainly Estes black young people in Rio, in the favelas. For every 5 young people, one is called Neng Neng Neng. He doesn't work, he doesn't study, and he doesn't look for employment. And so we have hundreds of thousands of and millions of young people who don't have, and they live in their own little world. They live only for the here and now. And we need to have policies that would look for partnerships with civil society to create these new methodologies to help these young people. Would you like to?
Claro.
Yes. Jailson gives an opportunity for me that the federal government is seeking to integrate policies and to promote the policies on human rights for all of communities, but I'd like to say that there is another challenge that we face. There is a movement in Brazil, which is the movement for criminalization of civil organizations, and this is not. It's a movement that of the policies, and if we don't understand the importance of the organizations of civil society and the social movements, and to see them as not as partners, we're not going to be able to face up to the real problems in society. Just as an example, there is in Brazil a program to eradicate misery in Brazil. It's called Miséria Brasileira. And for this to be efficient and for us to be able to do it, we need to build cisterns in the northeast of Brazil. There's only one organization that knows how to build cisterns, and it's called ASA, which is a civil society organization. If we don't involve ASA in the government policies to reduce the misery, we're not going to achieve our objectives. So if we have to see civil society as a partner to complement public policies, and this is reflected by a draft legislation in the Congress, and the social movement should not be criminalized.
Jailson, you mentioned in many of the important points you were making about the importance of creating a sense of identity of the people living in the favelas. You mentioned many aspects, and a lot of it resonates with the issue of violence, in particular against young blacks. But you also mentioned, nearly in passing, a phrase that for me was quite significant, was the ecological responsibility. You said that we need to understand, or there is a growing sense that we, citizens of any city, but particularly in the favelas, have a sort of ecological responsibility. Now, in some of the work that I've done with colleagues in other cities of the world, including São Paulo, it seems to me that there are a number of small-scale projects which actually bring people together in terms of actions, in terms of work, in terms of sense of accomplishment, which revolve around doing good things with water systems, with recycling rubbish and all that. Now, I was going to also ask you in terms of some of the programs you make, which we saw at the meeting, which were very much about day-to-day life, music and action, whether do you already document, so to speak, some of these initiatives with small scale, but so important in the way because of the potential of taking these as examples and scaling them up, in other cities, in other parts of your own city or other parts of the world. I just wondered if you could comment in particular, are there one or two examples that you find are of particular relevance when you were talking about the environmental, the ecological, and then perhaps you could comment on whether that's something you're covering in the media. You first.
Hoje no Brasil a consciência ambiental
today,
crescente.
the environmental awareness is growing, and what is more important, this movement is a number of cooperatives of recycling people. We have to recycle garbage, and in relation to the problem of poverty in Brazil, but the movement of cooperatives of people who recycle garbage is the one who has most impact. And the features of the people from Rio and of the favela, it's a creativity and invention, and they're very creative by excellence, and we have to motivate the local groups to create artistic groups, because there's a concept of the people who live in favela that we do culture but not arts. We do folklorical things, but we do not have any artistic capacity. So this is in the hand of course, middle-class professionals and white. And our challenge is to recognize that we produce art and we have to have chain values more with public investments. In the 90s, the funk gathered 1 million people at the weekend. It produced leisure, culture, and resources and employment. And the government criminalized the movement and destroyed in the 90s this production. So the challenge is to verify the economical and cultural practices in the favelas and made it more valuable. So these are enormous challenges. Well, first, something that we all Brazilian should have reinforced in this meeting is that we are a democracy. You have traditions, secular traditions. Would you be able to tell me which was the first presidential election after dictatorship? Someone knows? It was 1990. 1990. 1989. No. But this is very, very new. We are consolidating the institution still, and the problem that we have is our federative pact is terrible. Federal government, state government, municipal governments is an enormous complexity, and when you pass there are states in Rio where education is a responsibility of municipalities. In other states, it's from the state. So we have a lot of complexities in our rule of law, and we shouldn't be pessimistic, of course not, but we are progressing a lot. Brazil has grown enormously in all economical aspects, democratic aspects. So the view of Brazilians today is very optimistic, but it was a long journey. What you mentioned about ecology, I didn't come here to speak about global, but we have had for 10 years a program called Global Ecologia. On Saturday, turn to this theme. And we deal, well, the role of broadcasting is the role of journalism. It's a journalism with great reports and articles. So in Brazil, we see that the state has enormous concern with this theme, but having to confront with powers the private initiatives. We are not great broadcasters, but we saw recently a dispute about a hydroelectric where the government has to be divided. It's a country that started to having blackouts for lack of electric energy, but they were going to deforest an enormous region. And now we approved a law of protection for our forests, which is very important. And the ecologists find that it was a failure, and others as well are very unhappy. So you have to remember this is a very young country, but we're doing very well.
Right, thank you for that. Now, Sandra, or whoever, do we have time for, do we have microphones for questions from the floor, or do you just shout? A few minutes? Okay, so question from the front? Wait for the microphone and can, for the benefit...
Se a Marlova não ia falar.
Tell us who you are, too, please.
I am Marlova Noleto from UNESCO Brasilia office. I will apologize and speak in Portuguese. Eu queria fazer comentário muito rápido. Nós falamos aqui nessa última mesa.
We spoke on this table, and we connected with other speeches. And Jailson made a summary of the importance of the dialogue between many partners, and also highlighted that CUFA and Afro-Hagi, what they do and what they did in terms of innovation. So we have to produce knowledge on top of this. So I wanted to speak about the enormous privilege for UNESCO and in the world, this office in Brazil, which together with LSE, CUFA, and Afro-Hagi, and also with an amazing support of Itaú Cultural and Fundação Social, without which we could not have made this research. It would not have been a reality. So I wanted to highlight exactly the innovation of this partnership. This partnership is a multi
with different actors that all jointly together were capable and able to establish such a research founded by Itaú Social and Itaú, funded by Itaú Social and Itaú Cultural, e foi justamente
this multiplicity of actors that made possible what we saw here today. So there's more than dialogue, more than diversity, but it's the capacity of together produce knowledge about what Brazil does best. And this is a motive of pride for all of us to be all together here to teach the old world what the new world has to show.
Thank you for doing my job. And she did it much better. No. So no thank yous anymore, because otherwise are there questions from and can they be questions, not statements?
Well, then I'll probably
tell us who you are and be very precise, please.
Well, I had a statement and a question.
No.
What's
the question?
Okay. Well, my question is, my name is Tim Carhill. I work for Amnesty International, and I did want to kind of, well, anyway, I'll skip my statement then. My question really relates to that there has been a lot of positive stuff that's come out of the meeting today, and a lot of interesting discourse, and I think that's shown a real change in the discourse and what Brazilians have taught organizations like my own who work in possibly often I won't say confrontational way, but more denunciatory way. But what I think one of the things that we still find is a problem when looking at the situation in terms of change in Brazil, is about whether there is a combined vision and participation between federal government proposals for change and state government proposals for change and civil society government. There seems to be very much a kind of fractured kind of approach to this, and I'd very much like a kind of interpretation about how that can be seen as more collaborative and less focused on one solution, such as just police going into communities.
I think that's a very good question. We'll come to the panel. Maybe you can all comment on that. Other questions? Here at the front.
Well, I'll talk in English, although I speak Spanish. My name is Carlos Torres, postdoctoral research fellow at the University of Southampton, but I did my PhD here. My question is more or less related to the previous one, is that the best way to influence policy is that you are the one in charge of making policy. So my question is, to what extent there is a political integration of people from the favelas into the political game, not talking with politicians, but being politicians, being part of the political dynamics, and to what extent and how is that political dynamics nowadays in those favelas of Rio or other cities in Brazil?
Okay, thank you. So basically it's the bottom-up, top-down question with the middle, the state being very much... another question? Lady here?
Boa tarde, meu nome é Júlia,
My name is Julia. I'm a student of social policies in planning. I'm asking to Rogerio, I'm interested to know better the program Juventude Viva, which are the actions that compose it, and how the Secretary General of the Presidency of the Republic will work to guarantee the articulation between these projects and between the ministries, and maybe not repeat what happened with the actions that were involved with pro-Nazi, which in the end were not well articulated in terms of prevention.
Okay, I'm going to ask each of you to respond to all three questions. They're very connected. So if you start, 1, 2, and end with the center. As in
Eu vou falar justamente como
I'm going to
instituição.
speak as an institution not linked to government or third sector. I spoke about Federative Pact, and this is very factual. Some days ago, there was an explosion of violence. We're not going to speak about only Rio. We'll speak about Rio. They attacked policemen and the action plan was to attack and kill policemen. And we saw for 48 hours a discussion of the governor of São Paulo with the federal government about responsibilities for them to sit down and resolve it, and to see if it was a state problem or. And this Federative Pact is a problem. We always going to have these problems because of the different governments. In terms of politics, I would like to say something. I never mentioned that there should not have partnerships with the third sector and NGO with the government. What concerns me is when the NGOs are used to resume policies of the government. I think the NGOs should be used to complement and not use government policies. And I can give you examples. I can see that people are not agreeing. In Rio de Janeiro, the health policy in the municipality is applied by an NGO, and this is not right. Brazil historically has a culture, as Erlanger already said, of discontinuity in public policy. Every new governor tries to build its own name and its own work. This has improved. There's a feeling that it's not Republican. When a governor comes to power, he thinks he can use the resources as he wants. He does not have an objective to create mechanisms of participation. So if he's a president of the republic and the governor is allied to him, he can give resources. But if not, he won't give resources. This has been changing very slowly. Today in Rio, it was used as currency, the fact of cooperation between the federal entities, municipal, federal government, and state. And sometimes is, well, you vote for me because I'm the friend of the king. But progressively, we're progressing to recognize the need of integration. But this is not yet on the political agenda, in the question of participation. Lula government progressed in this sense, but did not advance in terms of social control over the state or political participation. We do not have mechanisms of referendum, participating resources, and the real police is more open for the participation, but more because of the secretaries and directors and more than for official policy. There's no change of culture that would give more popular participation with the government. So we always worry that government changes and the politics change as well. So when PP came to stay, he's saying that the residents are very worried because with the change of government, the PPs might disappear. So it's important, this participation. And I would like to conclude saying that I agree in number and gender with Erlanger. We have to collaborate in other ways, create methodology, and other complementary work, but we cannot substitute the role of the state, which is central. Well, in relation to the first question raised, and now I'll answer very quickly because we don't have time. But the question of the Federative Pact is very important because who carries out the policies are the states. But it's not complicated. I'll give you an example. We started with a program, Juventude Viva, as a pilot in the state of Maceió. This state is the most violent of the country. It has 4 communities that have a rate of criminality against blacks that is horrifying. And the state of Alagoas, is governed by a governor of the opposition to the federal government. And this governor, Antonio Vilela, which is from PSDB, he talked to the federal government and asked a pilot there. So I went to launch and prepare the plan. We worked 3 months to implement the program there. And he put all his secretariat available to implement this plan. So the partnership is fundamental for the political life of the governor because the state is chaotic and he's betting on this program. So partnership is important and they want to implement their programs, but he needs to count with the state. When the state is open to receive policies of the federal government, there's no problem. We had recently a problem with difficulties in relation to the São Paulo state and the federal government. The federal government offered help, the Ministry of Justice help, to contain the wave of violence, and the state government wouldn't accept. And then there was some discussions, but in the end it accepted, and the federal government will help. So there's a complicity and difficulty in the construction of the Federative Pact. It is viable, and all the policies the federal government has executed was done with the Executive Pact, Federative Pact. We included 40,000 people in the Bolsa Familia. Julia, there are 32 actions of 13 ministries. Actions in the area of health, like Viva Jovem, which is the reinforcement of the project of health for the young people, for young women. We have other programs. Brazil Quilombola is another program. We have, as I mentioned, the program of the Ministry of Education, which is more education to increase the amount of hours in the schools, and also in the state of Alagoas, we universalized the education in all the schools of the 4 territories, the most violent territories, which is Maceió, União de Palmares, Marechal Deodoro, and another, which I don't remember the name. So we universalized the education. The open school, we had the open schools implemented in these 4 municipalities with a lot of education and cultural activities for all the community, for all the family, as a way of fighting violence in these places. So we can speak later. We have 32 actions. They're very important. They implement this. And the General Secretary has to coordinate these actions through a management committee with the 13 ministries that participate.
This final discussion is about perhaps what one might call conventional infrastructures, to do with the politics of decision-making in the ways we know. What is so clear and so powerful, I think, in the work that has been done by Sandra and her team, which is in the documents and really has come out through all the presentations today, is a sort of, as you call it, the underground sociability, that which is not visible, sort of forms of associational life, which in many ways cut across many of the sort of issues that we happen to have discussed now. Not to say that one is more important than the other, but that the two need to be aware of each other. I, for one, as a sort of outsider, as a student of Brazilian cities, have found that there is a richness in capacity building, in imagination, in the Brazilian city, which is, to me, really extraordinary. And when I have brought people from Mumbai, for example, from India, or from Istanbul, to see what was happening in some of these smaller scale initiatives in São Paulo, they were absolutely overwhelmed with the possibilities and positive lessons that they could take away with them. I mean, I think if there's one way of summarizing, I think, this work, which is implicit already in the many of the words that Sandra you use in not only the title, you know, underground sociabilities already has a spatial dimension, but the notion of, you know, border crossing at all level is eminently spatial. It's all about people being able to go and not being stopped from going. And I think what we heard today, including the use of media to cross borders, which probably 2 years ago, certainly in your company, would have seen a no-go area, is absolutely fascinating. And the whole notion which Rogerio used of, you know, the fact that a government minister talks about psychosocial scaffolding. I wish we had that in Britain. You know, it would be we'd be very pleased, and Sandra would have the highest impact of any academic here in the university. And I think Jailson has talked so much and so passionately about the aspects of associational life which are present and need to be made even more visible. Really, all I have left to say, because the thanks have been said. But it is important to remember these events don't happen if it isn't for an enormous amount of work done by probably people I'm not going to mention, because Sandra hasn't told me who they are, but they know who they are. And they're usually at the back of the room in these occasions, around the front of the room. But before applauding everyone, I think there are 2 or 3 names of people and organizations important to stress. Obviously, UNESCO and Ditao Social. Without their support and funding, none of this work over the last years would have happened. The 2 organizations that have been featured in many ways are and have been open to collaboration with the researchers. This is not an easy thing to do, to lay yourself out as an experiment in many ways, to be understood, and then lessons learned, I think, are very important. Today, there's no doubt there are 2 people who are much more important than anyone else. And it's the 2 interpreters. What? I couldn't hear you. Okay. You see, now we're remembering who's at the back. So the technician at the back who's made everything happen. Is that what you were saying, Sandra? The technician. A big thank you to the technician. Now, a number of us have had conversations with Craig Calhoun, the new director of the London School of Economics, who I know cares passionately about these issues. And he made an announcement only a few weeks ago when he came to the school about a number of key concerns which this very global institution has very much at its heart. And 2 of those key concerns are very much what have been talked about here. One is interdisciplinary study. And the mere word that you use, sociology, says a lot. And that cities are, in his mind, at the heart of understanding sort of interdisciplinary processes are a very important aspect, certainly for the future of our collaboration, not only in the school, but our collaboration with all the institutions represented in this room, all the authorities who come from Brazil, to represent different levels of states and different institutions in government, and of course all the representatives of the communities who actually have made things happen on the ground. Thank you all very much, and very importantly, we now go downstairs. Everyone is invited for drinks in the senior common room, which is just below us. Thank you again, and thank you to the organizers.